we were a team that ended up not raising a lot of money, and we waited a long time. And as a result of that, a lot of the team owned a good percentage of the company. 12 people in a team of, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people became, at least made $1 million or more, in our acquisition. And it was because we were distributing equity to the team, even though it was a relatively small acquisition compared to the, $1 billion exits in the industry.
Welcome to Generation Builders podcast, brought to you by Software. I'm your host, Mariam. The goal of the show is to unpack and share the superpowers and lessons of today's most successful software companies and discuss how the next generation will use and build software without code. I interview world-class product, growth, and community experts who help build some of the best companies of today. Hello, everyone. Hey, welcome, Scott. So excited to have you join us.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks, Mariam.
Scott is one of the most talented and beloved figures in the tech industry and an incredible product person. He's an entrepreneur, author, investor, chief product officer, and I think strategy officer now in Adobe, formerly founded Behance in 2006 and served there as a CEO until Adobe acquired the company in 2012. And if you are a creator, you know what Behance is for sure. If you're not, for those who don't know, millions of people use Behance to display their portfolios and as well as find top talent across the creative industries. And Scott is also an investor and advisor in early days in Pinterest, Uber, Periscope, and our beloved Airtable, and among many other fast-growing companies, startups. He's also an author of 2 books, Making Ideas Happen and The Messy Middle. And dad and husband, that's a lot. That's a lot, Scott. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
Scott, you have unique talent for creating amazing products and experiences, and I know you have big bias towards action, getting started, executing, and not just ideating. And I really love that because it so much resonates with the way I think and the way we also run the company. Was that early on the reasons you created Behance? And yeah, why? Maybe if you can share a bit how you decided to start Behance and why at all care about that space and the people around.
Yeah, well, I've always been inspired by frustration. When I'm frustrated with the way something works or the way something doesn't work. And in this case, I found that the creative industry was extremely disorganized. A lot of my friends in the creative world were living their lives and their careers at the mercy of circumstance. And it just struck me, gosh, like why can't people get attribution for their work? Why can't they get more opportunity based on how amazing they are? Why can't they get more organized? And so with the origin of Behance, actually, in some ways, we were against creativity because what we felt is that our customers already had enough ideas. They had so much creativity. What they needed was more organization. The conference we founded and ran for 10 years was called the 99% Conference. It was inspired by that famous Edison quote that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And the idea of the conference was, let's only focus on the perspiration part. Let's have people speak, but not present their portfolios or where their ideas come from, but rather how they get them done. And so the company was always about having this bias towards action, was all about execution, the perspiration that was required to make ideas see the light of day. And that really resonated with our audience because they were all creative.
Nice. And so would you consider yourself, like early on, were you also part of that group? Were you part of that community? And did you yourself face the same problem and you kind of also try to solve it for yourself? Or just trying to understand why you cared so much about that problem?
Yeah, well, I certainly had taken a number of design classes as an undergrad. I was really into design. I don't think I had the language at the time, but it was really product design that was something that was always on my mind. How a product worked, what the interface was like. I mean, that was stuff I was always an obsessive over or a critic of. Even before I was doing it as a builder. And I also just always was admiring like the stuff that my friends were in the fine arts, what they were building. I had a good friend growing up who became a well-known painter, and photographers or architects or illustrators. I went to Cornell where there was an architecture school and had a bunch of friends who were over there. So the inspiration was all of those things. But these are the people that make our lives interesting. If you think about what the world would look like without merchandising, without art, without design, without any of these things, like nothing would compel us to engage. And so, it's always been on my mind, like how important this set of talents is to the world.
Yeah, totally. And it's same with any business, right? I think you also mentioned it rightly in previously somewhere I heard about, business outcome generally is, business is business, right? You build products and companies for earning money and for making it a business. But in the end, there's lots of this creative part that doesn't get valued a lot of the times, which is what makes it different, unique, right? And special experience.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And early on, you kind of almost entirely bootstrapped the company from scratch, right? So with some gigs, funding on your own, and because you already had the company kind of established, already going, the product was there, I think. Why did you decide to raise money?
Well, we raised money when members of my team felt like they could no longer do the best work of their lives with the resources that we had. I remember a few engineers coming and saying, there's scalability that we need this expertise, we need that expertise. And we found the candidates, but we can't hire these folks unless we can afford to, cover their salaries, and that we have to grow in order to really feed the opportunity that we're trying to tackle here. And, that made sense to me. But until then, we actually really enjoyed being a team that had a discrete number of projects, and we had a number of things that were making revenue that could feed us. And I would oftentimes during our bootstrapping years go to the team and say, listen, we can either give this equity to a VC or we can give it to us. And what do you want to do? And it's like it was always a team decision, and it really didn't change until about 5 years into the experience.
Yeah, that's so amazing because, in the end, the team is what makes the company, right? And that's so much valuable to share that, and also let them choose.
And also, by the way, we were a team that ended up not raising a lot of money, and we waited a long time. Right. And as a result of that, a lot of the team owned a good percentage of the company. 12 people in a team of, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people became, at least made $1 million or more, in our acquisition. And it was because we were distributing equity to the team, even though it was a relatively small acquisition compared to the, $1 billion exits in the industry.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. And early on when building the product, so you said you had discrete number of products and also some that were bringing revenue. What was the hardest part going from 0 to 1 in the very early phases? And what's actually your advice for early stage founders going through it today?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about product market fit, right? Which is customers demanding your product remain. And early stage, I think one of the things we make a mistake around is trying to do too many things at once. That's a mistake I made many times earlier on as a product builder. And I always advise teams to optimize for the problems they want to have. What's a problem that you want to have is, like a customer getting into your product, loving it, but saying, oh my gosh, I need you to have integration with this tool, or I need to be able to do this, nuanced capability in the product. Like those are the things you want your customers to be asking for. And so don't do them before you launch the product. Like put it out there and get feedback. The problems you don't want to have are brick walls. You don't want to have where a customer can't even sign up, can't even use it at all, can't even get the basic utility. And so I always encourage teams to optimize for the problems they want to have. And therefore, that's a very good mechanism for prioritization.
Yeah, I like the way you kind of frame it. It's basically just thinking more from a problem perspective. Where do I focus? And that basically also means just shipping, right? Just ship whatever you have, whatever version. And most of the time, also customers, if they care, if they really like the product and it brings value, they will also tell you what else they are missing.
That's right.
Cool. You worked, so in your previous experience working with all these, different companies, your own product, and also with lots of other companies through advising roles, what are some common kind of patterns you're seeing in building products that really make the product extraordinary? Is it design? Is it maybe your user experience? What is specifically about really making into the product, and what's important for customers to stick with the product and to really love it?
Well, I'll tell you one that I think is less intuitive, that I think we should all prioritize more so in the development of our products. And that is surprise and delight, and the mechanisms that make people talk about your product. Because that is ultimately product-led growth also, right? Is when people are out there talking about your product without you paying them and without marketing expenses associated, right? And why do people talk about a product? Well, they don't talk about a product doing what they expected it to do. They talk about a product doing what they didn't expect it to do. And that's counterintuitive, because you'd think that with a roadmap of a million things that your product will need to do over time, why would you ever prioritize something that your product that they didn't expect, that it doesn't sort of need to do? I mean, and you look at Tesla, for example. Famously, Tesla has a $0 marketing budget, and they have all these Easter eggs in the car. They have a fireplace mode where you put it in the mode and the fireplace comes on and the heat goes high, right? They have Rainbow Road, where your road becomes a rainbow, or like a reindeer, your car becomes a reindeer. And why do they do these things? I mean, you can imagine in the product and engineering meeting, when there's this laundry list of things to make the car perform better, and someone's like, I have an idea, let's prioritize Rainbow Road over all these different things. But I think it's a very important insight around how a product grows. And so we need to find the few things that we believe our customers will talk about that they didn't expect our product to do, and we need to make sure that they happen.
And do you think this is something should come rather from the founder? Because especially as the team grows, right, it's always going to be a conversation of, okay, how much impact this can have. And a lot of the cases, it's especially for those types of these delightful experiences, it's hard to sometimes also assume what's going to happen, or if customers will really like it or not. Or would you say there's a way to kind of measure it in some way, or at least have a qualitative feeling if it's worth doing?
I mean, ideally it comes from a member of the team who is also a customer, who uses the product, who also has a little bit of a sense of humor and an understanding of how social media and the world works, who comes up with this clever idea. And then it's up to the founder to value it. A lot of founders or CEOs would be like, don't waste my time, get back to work and do what we need to do to make our quarterly goal. But I think that the whimsical leader who understands why people talk about products would get excited about this crazy idea and empower the team to make it happen.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's so important, especially in early days when the team is small and very much is happening as, small group of people really agreeing on the prioritization a lot of the times, really just understanding more qualitatively without having much data at hand, right?
Yeah.
And with the with you being so much, having bias toward action, which is probably the right way to describe. What do you think is kind of, how did you find balance between launching something quickly, basically speed of execution in any startup really, versus perfecting the product for this delightful experience, for having the best, at least the early version of that the customers feel that and they get the value early on, helps them throughout, whether it's an onboarding process or anything else. So there is always this balance you try to find within a company. So how did you manage that? How did you manage to find that balance, or what would you recommend people do?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's often a conversation around the minimum viable product, right, and getting something
Mm-hmm.
out quickly versus shipping something that that has a center of gravity around it and gets people emotionally engaged and is essentially very polished. And so these things seem to be opposed, right? I first of all, I think that whatever a team ships has more lasting power than you think. The idea that we can just put out a minimum viable version of this and then we can iterate completely based on whatever we learn in the market and pivot or whatever, like let's just
Mm-hmm.
get something out there. I do believe that that's flawed for a few reasons. Number one is psychologically, it's extraordinarily hard for a team to make major changes to something that anyone is actually using. And so when you get something out there in the market, your default is just to iterate it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
hard to fight that. And I've done it before. I've pulled the plug on products or told customers, sorry, we're changing something. And it's a really hard thing to do because you're upsetting people. And so even though you think you can just throw things in the market and see how they do, I think practically speaking, if you have any degree of empathy, that's very hard. So make sure whatever you put out there, you feel somewhat confident in, which requires more polish and some additional testing as well. The second thing I would say is that it's okay to ship with very few features, and also some rough features, or ship in public beta or whatever you want to call it, or private beta. But make sure that you polish the few things that matter most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The things that you feel are your competitive advantage should always be polished because that's what you want to be known for. And also, they shouldn't be outsourced. And that's another thing I talk to teams about sometimes is, listen, if you're making some developer tool where design doesn't matter, then by all means, use a design team or firm, from somewhere else and just have them do a cosmetic treatment of your developer console. But if you want to be known for your user experience, you cannot outsource design. It's part of your competitive advantage. You have to do it in-house.
Yeah, totally. I really like how you consider also design as part of competitive advantage, because in many cases that is, right?
Yeah, it should
Well,
be.
exactly, especially in many, even in B2B SaaS products, especially more enterprise focused, well, that hasn't been hasn't been there by default for many products, also like maybe 10 years ago, etc. But I think nowadays it's interesting that also the expectation of everyone using and seeing a tool, modern tool, right, that has increased so much that you at least have to have some level of baseline design or experience already in the
Yeah,
product when you're launching. Yeah,
that's
it's
right.
interesting. It's always hard to find that balance.
It is.
We
It
kind of
is.
daily
That's
struggle with it.
that's our job.
Yeah. And when is the actual time when, how did you figure out it's like everyone, so this is a question that I think there's no concrete answer ever, but how did you figure out that you have a product market fit? Or how do you think about that at all? Like, was it from one day to the other, or from specific period of time you already realized, okay, this is working, customers really like the product, they value it so much, they're paying for it? Or how was that kind of, how did you come to that conclusion?
I think there were various moments where I gained confidence in our thesis, but the first one that really comes to mind is when I would come into the office in the morning and turn on Behance and just see a flood of new work from people around the world, from people I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool. The idea that, wow, like, while I was sleeping, all these people were creating projects in their portfolios, and I would click on, like, this person's from Romania, and this person's from London, this person's from Saudi Arabia, and this person's from Japan. And I was like, wow, and then also I think when people started to share anecdotes of getting jobs, or I
Mm-hmm.
would read a blog on a design blog, like a blog post, and it would have a link to a person's portfolio, and that link would go back to Behance. It's when it started feeling real. Now, we didn't have a revenue model yet, at that time, and we needed to build both the supply and the demand side to have a talent marketplace, and there were all these other things to figure out. But it was, that was what gave me that feeling of, okay, this is working.
Yeah, and that's so magical and rewarding, right? You realize that, yes, this is something that people actually use your creation, and it daily, this changes their life in some way. It might not be, different ways changing people's careers or lives, even in some cases, because they find the job that they never could do before.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have those metrics too, where you come in and see like how many new apps have people made, and it's just like you see those numbers climb, that you're adding value to people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to the more community side of things. So obviously Behance, especially being more a consumer focused product, at least in the beginning, there was a huge and passionate community around Behance, right? How did you kind of nurture that community? Maybe you didn't call it community early on, maybe that was just customers or the users of yours, but how did you nurture it? What were some maybe frameworks you thought through, or the way you interacted with them that they really were passionate and you kind of supported them to really stay engaged and continue promoting and supporting Behance?
Well, I'll answer the question in two ways. On a product level, we wanted to make sure that people saw the benefits of being on Behance. And so we were very focused on making sure that it was very easy for people to appreciate the project. We don't require you to log into Behance to click the appreciate button. And so as a result, the appreciation numbers that people get on their projects are higher, right? And that's an important feedback mechanism for someone to feel like their work has been appreciated. And so that seems obvious, but at the time you couldn't like things on websites unless you were logged in. So it was different. So we did a lot of things in the product to make sure that people feel the gratification of being part of the community. And internally we would call those things ego analytics, analytics that let you know how great you are. Yeah.
How did you measure those ego analytics? How did you measure those metrics? If they were totally based on maybe like psychology or people's behaviors, how did you measure even those?
Well, really, we were trying to help them measure their own. With ego analytics, for example, would be you seeing how many people saw your work, or you seeing how many people appreciate your work, or you seeing how much growth you had over last week in terms of your reach. Those are things that make you feel good about yourself. And we want to present them to you in a way that makes you feel good about yourself. And so that's kind of part of the science of building a product that makes people feel good, right? I think that the second thing that drove engagement, and the feeling of community was also the offline stuff that we did. So we launched a huge effort called portfolio reviews, where people from all around the world could host a portfolio review in their local town or city. Mm-hmm. And we sent them a kit of collateral and instructions for how to host a local portfolio review. We didn't pay these people. They were hosts, and they would host their fellow creative community together. And one of the things we did is we made these coins, and you only got a coin if you presented at a portfolio review, which takes guts, it takes courage. Mm-hmm. And these coins, became like a really fun reward for the community who would go to a portfolio review and present. And that was the one thing we would do. Like, we would send all these hosts coins, and we would tell them the rules. And that was another thing we did. Like, one example, of many.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that's incredible, and I love hearing there was two parts, not just the community and the just the people aspect, but also on the product. You try to really kind of nail down this aspect of, it's not necessarily the features that is going to bring the most, right, business value, maybe business value long-term, right, but not revenue. But those are the things where people really care about. And I think especially in the creative world, anything where people are building things themselves, right, or building whatever that is, whether it's their creations or ideas, they love to be sharing those. They love to be proud about those, etc. Where you found, how do you even incentivize even more of that?
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And also, just talking a bit about the team, your team you kind of created early on. So were there some characteristics and mindset specifically you were looking for when bringing new team members into your team, especially early on with when bootstrapping, when probably comparably it probably was harder to hire compared to venture-backed companies?
Well, I always tried to hire for initiative over experience. I just felt like people who are initiators are the ones who just keep trying to find a better way to do something. Whereas when you hire a very experienced superstar, they kind of come in and they just want to sort of do the thing that's made them successful in the way that they know how. And if something changes or pivots or whatever, those people sometimes struggle because they're not necessarily very adaptable. And also they won't take the time to figure out how to learn a new language per se or something like that if they have to. So we hired our early stage team was not experienced, but everyone had a ton of initiative. And we were all at a time in our lives where we were willing to work overtime to make up for our lack of experience. That's one of the things I have about this whole kind of hustle culture concept. And I actually do believe that you can have a balanced life and be an entrepreneur. But if you need to have some experience to make up for, to be able to make better decisions more quickly. If you don't have experience, I think it's very hard to have a balanced life and be successful because you just have to throw time at every problem. There were so many things that we did in the early stage of Behance that we had to do again and again and again that we probably should not have had to do that way. But we did it, we took the long way to figure it out.
But it also takes that takes courage, that takes grit, and that takes people initiative. And as you said, right, willing to try out again, right, after failing, to try again until they find the solution. And that's what exactly I was referring to. Being a small company, Scott, and if it is scrappy and a doer team, then getting acquired by big company with big teams and departments. Can you share biggest lessons you learned from the acquisition and how things basically changed and your role also changed before Behance and after?
Yeah, you never know how you're going to operate within a larger company until you actually go through it. And also every company is different. And people like to generalize the outcome of acquisitions. Oh, big companies kill small companies. When you generalize a group of people, you marginalize the potential of individual people. And, in my case with Adobe, Adobe is a company that has always grown through new DNA. People coming in with new ideas, new companies coming in, new leaders coming in. A lot of the leaders of different parts of Adobe came in through acquisitions, actually.
Right.
And so it was a company that fostered change in that way. And so coming in 2012, December 2012, right after the transition to Creative Cloud, it was a great opportunity to come in and bring a lot of the things we've learned as a community and a web-based network that were different ideas for a company that had built kind of a desktop flagship franchise. And so in that instance, I think our team came in and felt like we had a lot to add very quickly. And that was what engaged us and kept us and allowed us to take on more responsibility over time.
Nice. And what are some other things you kind of brought back to Behance from Adobe? Maybe practices or processes or other types of things which are more typical to bigger companies and usually early stage startups could leverage as well in some cases.
Yeah, I learned a lot, over the years about process, about management, about the ways to operate and improve a business model. There were so many things, my goodness, that we learned as a crash course in the first year, and then some things that just took many years to really absorb and learn. And then hopefully we also brought in, some best practices of our own as it relates to design and, what I like to call collapsing the stack of a team. I think that Adobe used to be an organization where every design was over here and engineering was over here, and being able to bring some of these functions together, especially as it relates to emerging products and new features and that kind of thing, was something that maybe was a little bit more familiar with a startup as opposed to a larger company.
Yeah, and Adobe, as you said, it's a really kind of a company which stays top of game and ahead of curve for lots of new innovation. Would you say that really is kind of coming back to being open to really bringing talented individuals and also teams from other companies through acquisitions like Behance, Figma, and others, I assume, and really being open to new entrepreneurial minds and ideas?
Yeah, I mean, we are constantly looking at every segment that we play in. And we're also sometimes looking for new segments that we can bring into the company that really diversify, the types of markets we can be in. But when it comes to like the segments that we're already playing in, we're always thinking like, what's the edge of that segment that will someday become the center? And then do we build that internally? Is that something, are there new people or technology we can bring into the company that enable us to do that better? And one of the examples was the 3D and immersive franchise. That was a completely new segment to us. And we believed, though, that it was sort of at the edge of things like photography and may become the center for commercial photography. People want to render things as opposed to shoot them in a photo studio. And so we made the investment in buying a small company in Paris that was doing that work. And then that team came in, and then they've built other products, and we built, a whole franchise now of 3D and immersive tools that, I think will change the way a lot of creative fields and tasks are done.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, and with the current emergence of AI and no code in general, what are some trends you are most excited about the future as well? And yeah, maybe let's start from there.
I think that I don't know any creative professional in the world that would like to take 2 hours to do something that could be done in 2 minutes or 2 seconds. And so these capabilities need to be brought into our tools to outfit creative professionals to do more with less time. And also what I know from creative professionals is that great ideas and insights come from increased surface area of discovery, the ability to try many, many things and explore many, many ideas, and then narrow them in further and further to the point where they come up with something that has, that is really exciting, new, and for what they, that they have great conviction for. And so how do you optimize for that? I think that generative AI is a tool that helps you do that, because it's almost like having an assistant that can explore all these possibilities for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also the power there is, so now people have to become basically proficient with using these tools, right? It's not that probably the jobs are not going to be taken away, but the jobs of those people who are able to use these tools to their leverage, to be able to basically have all of this power of discovery and using the knowledge of the world that's available to them, but they have to be able to use that. So that's kind of becoming a new skill. And whether it's using AI or using no-code tools or anything else that really helps you be more proactive and be able to do things that instead of 2 days you could do in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and listen, I also think that we all want to be more confident, right? And I mean, your tool helps people become more confident in making applications, whereas they might have felt like they would never get the skill set and never know the languages they need to know to be able to build applications. Now they can. And similarly with generative AI tools, it makes everyone more creatively confident. Now, if you have this idea in your mind of an animation or an illustration, you don't have to have gone to design school. You can now sort of use your language to do that. And that's empowering.
Exactly. That's so exciting. And I can't wait to see what's happening in the near future, very near future. How do you think, yeah. And how will a new generation of kids learn and use and build software, you think? How would that happen? Will they,
so.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, design and software has something in common. They're both disciplines that intend to solve problems. So there's no shortage of problems in the world. There's no shortage of problems in our country. There's just so many problems everywhere. And the more people are outfitted with design and software tools to solve problems, and the lower the bar is of sophistication to use those tools, the better.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can't agree more. Thank you so much for the amazing conversation, Scott, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. Where can people find you in the internet?
Oh, yeah, I'm easy to find. Just at Scott Belsky on your social platform of choice, I guess. And I have and implications.com is the newsletter that I use to just share ideas and get feedback on all the things top of mind. So that's Implications.
Yeah, absolutely. Subscribe to it and stay tuned for the next episodes. Thank you so much, Scott.